I was contemplating yesterday how to proceed. And of course, you know, my normal mode is I spend I know this book fairly well anyway, but I usually spend a couple of hours a night before preparing how the lesson is going to go today. So last night, though, I had an interesting thought, and we'll see how this works. I was thinking I want to do things differently today. Just because this is an incredibly difficult text, just to read, the sentences themselves are very difficult. So what I would like to try is to get you guys to read today. We'll read sentence by sentence very slowly, and we'll see if we can deconstruct one sentence at a time. I don't know if it'll work. Obviously, you're not leading the class. I want to see how this works. If it doesn't work, we'll stop, But I want to, just as an experiment, to try this, if you guys are okay with that. Obviously, I don't expect you to, this is not an exercise in mastery, right? This is not an exercise in you teaching the text right now. We're all coming cold. I didn't even look at the text last night, which I never do. I always look at the text the night before. But I want to try as an exercise to come to the text cold and see if we can make sense of it together, yeah? Let's try it. Let's give it a shot, okay? So last night we did this, we're on page 39. I want to try, let's see if we can go to, we're going to go section by section. The sections that I've... Okay, on page 40, let's look at page 40. The second paragraph. Let's see if we can read the second paragraph together. Sam,
second paragraph.
On page 40, starting with the word conversation.
Conversation, from the very fact that it maintains the distance between me and the other, the radical separation asserted in Transcendence, which prevents the reconstitution of totality, cannot renounce the egoism of its existence. But the very fact of being in a conversation consists in recognizing in the other a right over this egoism, and hence in justifying oneself.
Okay, let's stop there. That's one long sentence. Okay, good. So let's now reread it in its parts, right? It's the first part. The first part of the sentence is telling us what is not, right? Conversation. Yeah. What is conversation not? Or not that it's not, but we're negating something about conversation.
I mean, it seems to me like the overall thesis of the sentence is that conversation involves is an assertion of the self, despite necessarily requiring another for one to occur, because it's a two-party interaction. So even though it's a conversation is simultaneously an encounter with the other and an assertion of the existence of the self.
First, he says that conversation is a radical separation. And as a radical separation, it prevents totality. And yet, he does say he cannot renounce the egoism. Okay, so conversation, bottom line, conversation is egoistic. Right? There's an element of egoism, in other words, of the self in conversation. Okay. Then we have the second clause, but, even though it is an egoism, but...
Basically, if I'm following this right, he's saying, if you, by sheer virtue of having a conversation, I am asserting or recognizing the existence of the other, because if they don't have some inherent right to exist or right to assert themselves as an other, then we can't actually have a conversation because it's just me talking to myself.
I think that's close, but there's one little thing that's it's a little strikes me as being a little bit off mark. He speaks of the others having a right. Now, what is this right? What is this right? He says it's a right over this egoism. Which egoism? right? The very fact of being in conversation being in a conversation consists in what? In a certain right. In a moral and possibly legal, proto-legal sense, right? So the other has a right. I'm talking to another human being, and the other human being has a right over what?
The same.
Oh, meaning? What do you mean by that?
The other, not literally the other. I mean the person who started the conversation.
Okay, good, right. So he says the word egoism, right, has a right over this egoism. Which egoism? It's my egoism. So he just told us in the first sentence, I cannot renounce my egoism. When I speak, I'm going to speak
for... It can only be done by the other.
Sorry?
So basically the other has the right to do it, and to me it implies that it can be done only by the other as well, to a certain extent.
What can be done by the other?
Overcoming this egoism.
Well, okay, okay, overcoming, but in what sense overcoming? Like not being egoistic? Not sure what you mean by that. What do you mean over? I want to be as precise as we can, right? Just to develop our reading skills here. Again, the first clause, you're obviously you guys are brilliant and you're on the right track. So, the first clause is telling us about an egoism. It says, "Look, ego in Latin means I. That's what ego means, I. So I start a conversation, and the conversation is going to be rooted in my egoism. It's not going to be all about you. I'm speaking, right? And then the second clause, he says, okay, but, the word but is important because it's qualifying that first clause. It says, but the other, the one I'm speaking to, has a right over what? This egoism. Which egoism? As you correctly say, my egoism. The other human being has a right over my ego. Now, what does that mean exactly? And he explains it in the very last clause. And hence, right? He says, and hence in justifying oneself. So what is that? Why in justifying? What does that tell you about this right? Justifying, this is all legalistic language, right? Justification, the right, and so on. The other has a right over my ego. Brigitte, today I'm taking a different strategy. I want to ask you guys to read. You don't even want to speak, never mind read, right? Yeah. Let's look actually at the next, we'll come back to this one. Let's look at the next sentence and then we'll come back to that sentence, okay? Now the next sentence begins with the word apology. The word apology has a history which is important. Apology, of course, in English means I'm sorry. When you say you're sorry, you're apologizing. But the word is actually a Greek word, like so many English words. Apologia in ancient Greek means defense. And apologia is what a person would do to defend themselves in a court of law. In ancient Athens, when they would hold a case against, when somebody was accused of something, so his self-defense, there were no lawyers back then. Nobody represented somebody in a court case. So if I was taken to court, if I was accused of something, I would stand before an ecclesia, an assembly of 500 men, and defend my case, which usually meant crying and weeping and telling them I have so many troubles at home and I don't have enough money and whatever. But that's what apologia meant, which is why, as you probably know, one of the earliest dialogues of Plato is called the Apologia, and when you read the Apologia of Plato, which is the Apologia of Socrates, Socrates never says, I'm sorry, in the Apologia. He never apologizes, but rather he defends himself. So that's the background to the word apology. It doesn't mean that it's not operating on both levels. In French as in English, apology means apology in the simple sense of the modern simple sense of the word. But because he's a philosopher, he's probably also has apologia in the Greek sense of the word in mind. By the way, in Hungarian, do you use that at all? Apologia or?
Apologia we use, but in the Greek meaning.
Apologia, and probably in Christian apologetics,
Yes.
right? Like when it's a style of Christian writing, Jewish also and Muslim. Like,
Also in the 16th, 17th century, it was a typical genre in Hungarian literature, explaining the reasons, especially the Protestants.
Exactly. So it's a genre in general in Europe of defending the doctrines of the church against philosophy. That's what apologia means.
Yeah.
Right.
But mostly theology in Hungary, but not philosophy necessarily.
No.
I mean, that part of philosophy, it's in Hungary, it's in terms of literature, it mostly was focused on theology, and it was quite common among the Protestants in Transylvania.
It's for sure theological, but whom are they defending the faith against? Who's attacking the faith?
It's hard to tell. I mean, basically against the world.
Okay, well, I mean, generally speaking, apologia, which is a theological genre.
Yeah, but basically it's the Catholic Church, mostly they are talking to.
So the Protestants are defending against the Catholics.
Yes.
Okay. So that is a different genre. Generally, the genre of apologia generally means to defend against philosophy,
That's
against
why I
science,
said that
whatever. Yeah.
Basically,
So it has a more a narrower meaning.
it's
Okay.
quite specific because normally it's Protestants in Transylvania in between the 16th century
Right.
up to the 18th century.
Yeah. It makes sense too. I'm not familiar enough actually. I'm sure Protestantism in general, beyond Hungary, also. Trying to remember of a text of apology where the word apologia is used by Protestants against Catholics. I don't remember. There's a famous text called Apologia pro vita sua, apology for one's life, which I think is by Thomas More, if I'm not mistaken, which means a defense of one's life, in defense of my actions. Okay, so here that's the background of the word, right? Apology. I'll read the sentence, and then we'll come back to the other first sentence. Apology, in which the I at the same time asserts itself and inclines before the transcendent, belongs to the essence of conversation. So what is he telling us? I think I should unplug this. It's becoming annoying here. Apology, again, in apology he says the I, the ego, it's the same word, now he's switching to French. He's not saying egoism, but he's saying the I at the same time, the I is doing two things. One, it asserts itself. What does that mean, the I is asserting itself? In apology, for example, specifically. In apologia or apology, the I is asserting itself. How? You would think in an apology, you're actually erasing yourself, aren't you? What do you think? If apology is taken in an ancient Greek sense of the word here, it's easier to make sense of what assertion means. Apologia is a self-defense. So I'm defending myself. I'm not nullifying myself before my interlocutor, before the person I'm speaking with. I am asserting my right, my innocence, whatever. So in that sense, I'm asserting myself. Apology in which the I at the same time asserts itself, and yet it inclines before the transcendent. inclines, in other words, it bends before the transcendence. On the one hand, I'm asserting myself in apology. On the other hand, I'm bending in the typical sense, in the modern sense of the word apology. I'm saying I'm sorry. So apology, which does both of these actions, belongs to the essence of conversation. The goodness in which conversation issues and from which it draws signification will not undo this apologetic moment. Okay, now let's go back to that last clause of the first sentence, right? When he speaks about the other has a right over this egoism and hence by the very fact of being in a conversation. What is a conversation? It consists in recognizing in the other a right over this egoism and hence in justifying oneself. Okay, now explain that to me. Okay, each one of you, give it a shot. Even if you get it wrong, don't worry about it. Sam, let's start with you again.
Just in terms of explaining what he means by a poem.
Yeah, or explain to me, can you explain to me what the word right means in that, the italicized word right? In light of what I just said about apology and so on.
If I followed you correctly, in essence, it's not necessarily I'm trying to think of a good way to put this. If it's an actual conversation where people are actually talking, they have the right to try to assert themselves on you and change your mind or change your way of thinking through the conversation. In essence, they can assert themselves, and that does something to your own egoism.
So you're saying the right is my right to assert myself in conversation?
Or not even that, to influence your interlocutor.
What do you think, Alexandra?
I'm lost in the second part, this inclines before the transcendent.
Yeah, like what does that mean, to incline before the transcendent?
Yes, I mean, I understand literally, but...
Well, here, remember, the transcendent for him is a synonym for infinite and for the other.
Yeah,
right.
I understand that. But
so to incline, it means I bend.
Yeah, I understand that part.
Yeah.
But what I don't understand, or what I'm thinking about is what is transcendent has to do with the right.
Okay.
So that's what I'm trying to get. That basically, as for some, it seemed assertiveness. For me, this transcendent seems to be the that part from where I want to approach. Well, somehow it's almost like that. This right is given or provided by this transcendent to the other.
Well, this is the question. We have to analyze this like a Talmudic text, okay? Who has a right over whom? When we say there's a right here, right? There's a legal, let's think of it legally.
But it's granted by someone.
The right is granted. Recognizing, that's actually, well, I don't see, how do you see that here?
No, that's what I'm trying to find here.
Yeah, so well, before we even talk about granting the right, just very, very, very basically, okay? Who has a right over whom? I have the ego, he says the ego, I, right? I, and in relation to a right, and the other. Who has a right over whom? I have a right over the other, or the other has a right over me, or what? What?
If it's a conversation, then it should be balanced.
Well, okay, but I'm asking you, what does the sentence of Levinas mean? In this specific sentence, who has a right over whom?
Okay, this is good. The other has a right over you.
Okay, good. That's exactly right, okay? The other has a right over me. The other has a right over me, Levinas says, right? So what you're saying is I have a right to free speech. You know, Sam speaks like a good American, right? I have an inborn right to say what I want. Now, those two don't go together very well, right?
Oh, no, so I probably was imprecise with my language.
That's
I
fine.
was using you as the baseline and myself as the other.
Ah, okay. So I'm the ego here, right? And this, I'm the I.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
good. I didn't understand.
I, as the other, have the right to try to change, to influence you through discussion, is what I was trying to get at.
Okay, so that's actually okay. So I'm sorry, I misunderstood that. That's right. Although he doesn't mention influence here, right? It's not a question of influence. You have a right over me. So let's take I am the I here, the ego, right? And in a conversation, I assert my, I speak from my ego. There's no question. And yet, as I'm speaking, you have a right over me, even though I'm the speaker. You're not speaking. You're just listening. Right? I'm actually the one in the mode of speech, which is why the speech is bound up with the ego, because the speech emanates from me. And the whole time you have a right over me. Okay? And then what does that mean for my speech, according to Levinas here? How does your right over me influence or shape the nature of my speech, according to what he's saying? It's after he says the other has a right over this egoism, and from there on it explains what that means exactly, how that shapes my speech.
Is it just essentially saying that what you will say is influenced by what your audience is?
More specific than that, that for sure, but that's too general and vague. Look at the very last clause, right after he says, the other has a right over this egoism.
I don't know.
Take a chance. It's okay.
What is justified?
Okay, good. Okay, what is justify? What does that mean, to justify oneself?
No. I mean, what is justify, the conversation or the I?
Well, he says justifying oneself, myself. So I am the I here. I'm speaking to Sam, right? Sam has a right over me in this conversation, and therefore, and hence, conversation consists, right? That's how the sentence works. Conversation consists in recognizing. I recognize in the other, in Sam, a right over this egoism, my egoism. I'm speaking to Sam, and I recognize that he has a right over my egoism, and hence, therefore, the conversation consists in justifying oneself. Therefore, I have to justify myself. And then the next word of the next sentence says, apology, which as I mentioned, means self-defense as well as being sorry, belongs to the essence of conversation. So what's he saying here? Gita, you have any thoughts?
First of all, I'm stuck that it's about conversation, not
Yeah.
about thoughts.
Yes,
About,
very important.
Cselekvés. Act.
What-
It's about acting, action that they do speak.
Yes, yeah.
So, and I cannot see something as a religious story. So, since it's very much focusing the Jewish thought to be careful what you say. It's not what you think. It's not all the time the same. You have to be so careful what is about the conversation when you open your mouth. And as Levinas in the beginning, very much focusing on history, that with speech you can change history even. You can change the fate, how it happened many times with some leaders, I think. So I'm thinking that this is really some interaction conversation, or this conversation still with the mind between me and the infinitive. This I cannot understand from this paragraph.
Well, here is not infinite. Here he means a real conversation, and your word interaction is even better than your word action, because he's talking about a conversation between two people, and he's trying to explain what is a conversation. And you're absolutely right. It's not about thinking, because thinking is just in my own head. So here he says that he's trying to explain what is essential in conversation.
So I think that the other one have a right that as he was talking about face also before a couple of pages,
Yeah.
but how much important the other one's face. Also, it didn't mean just with the imagination, the feeling, but also as we were talking about real faces of people to get to know them.
Yes.
So in a conversation like this, even if he have a right to say and he's sure about that what he's saying is the truth, immediately in the conversation, even from the small sense of the other one, you can feel what the other one feel about your speech. So it can change you immediately.
Okay, all of that is true. All of that is true. It's not wrong, but it doesn't. It's not quite getting to the specific. He has a very specific point that he wants to make here, and the key words are. Oh, I can't write on this board because it's not working. The key words are the word right. And you should be able to hear. They all belong to the same type of genre. The word right, the word justification, and the word apology. They all belong to a legal genre. A person has a right. A person has to justify from the word justice, and apologia, which means defense, as well as saying sorry. So what is that? And he's making specifically a point about this legal, as it were. It's not really legal in the strict sense of the word, but it's like a legal aspect of conversation. So what is he saying about that? And it is conversation. You're absolutely right. It's not about thinking. Go ahead, take a chance, somebody. Alexandra, I know you want to take a chance. I can hear it. No? Sam, one more shot?
I don't have a new answer.
Well, you don't have a new answer? Okay. Maybe it might be a case that it's just so painfully obvious that you don't think it's not even interesting. He's saying here that conversation, the essence of conversation, in this paragraph, not everywhere else, right? What is essential to conversation? It's that you have to justify your life. You're guilty. In a conversation, you have to assume you're guilty. If I open my mouth and I'm speaking to somebody, I have to assume that I need to justify. It's not, I can't just say what I want and walk away and feel like, oh, you know, I gave a piece of my mind. I shared a thought. Levinas says that's not a real conversation. A conversation is when I am on the stand in a court. When a person is in this, you know what the stand is, when in a courtroom, when you're being accused, you're well, I mean, to take the stand, you're also a witness, but you're always in a situation of being accused. That is what conversation is. You're being accused. It's a think of it as a Kafkaesque description of conversation. You're always being judged. By whom? By the other, by your listener. Whoever's listening to you is not, the listener, you have to assume, is not somebody who doesn't care what you have to say or accepts everything you have to say. The listener, the very nature of listening is judging. Listeners judging you and putting you on the hot seat. And so what comes out of your mouth is self-defense and apology. It's harsh, right? It's a very harsh kind of description of conversation here. It's Kafkaesque. It's almost a little bit like Dostoevsky, right? You're a criminal, and you have to justify your own existence. because in a sense you're always guilty. Kind of a weird description of conversation, but that's what the paragraph is saying. Intrinsically, conversation is being guilty and justifying yourself, apologizing. Basically, every word that comes out of your mouth is I'm sorry. In fact, even what I'm doing now, even a lecture, when I'm explaining, what am I, like we remember we said in the first class, I'm always coming to the aid of my word, because my word is always inadequate. My words are inadequate, so I come to assist my words. Here he's going a bit further, though. He's saying it's not just assistance. I have to assume that I'm in the wrong. And what comes out of my mouth is a defense of why I'm not in the wrong. And my defense might or might not work. You might accept what I say and say, okay, yeah, what he said was correct. Yeah, I'll accept that. Or as a listener, you always have the freedom to go, no, I don't think so. You might not say that. You might not say, you don't want to insult me, or you don't feel like getting into an argument, or whatever. You think I'm crazy. But in your head, you're judging what I said. And there's nothing wrong with that. Levinas says that's what conversation is. It's judging and being judged. Why do you think that's so important here, by the way? This is beyond the paragraph. In the context of what we said about Levinas so far, why is that important that conversation is self-justification and apology? Yeah?
I was trying to think of it in terms of Nazism. It would seem to me then that everyone starts from a position of weakness by default. I don't know. It's very counter to social Darwinism if everyone has power over everyone else at all times.
Yeah. Yeah, and here, I think that's right. And here the power is specifically Levinas harps on this point, that it's not power in the sense of force, but rather power in the sense of justice. It's not really power in a way, it's judgment. That we live in a constant state of judging each other. We're always judging each other. And therefore we're always defending ourselves in conversation. And that's, I mean, at least according to that paragraph, that's what conversation is. It's as simple as that. That's what conversation should be. Okay, let's try it again. If this exercise becomes too tiresome, I won't push you guys anymore. But I want to try at least one class to push you to see how this works. Okay, let's jump to page 42 now. We'll do another paragraph, less than a paragraph. On page 42, the beginning of this section, Metaphysics precedes ontology. Well, first of all, the title. Let's look at the title. Metaphysics precedes ontology. So this is an anti-Heidegger title, basically, right? Ontology, as I've mentioned before, comes from the word ontos, which means to be, being. And ontology has been said, for example, by Heidegger, to be the most fundamental questioning that we can have in philosophy is ontology. Even more in a way than theology. Usually theology is taken to be the most fundamental. There is no more abstract, more absolute question than the existence of God. But in a way, ontology is more abstract and more absolute. Why? Because in all of our conversations, whenever we talk about what something is, we're always using the word is. The concept of being is the most abstract, least tangible thing there is. Even the word thing is inappropriate because the word thing assumes that something is. We're always assuming that something is the case. So ontology is the study of what is of isness, of being. Now he says metaphysics precedes ontology, and we know that the way he's using the word metaphysics is not in the classical sense, but more in the sense of ethics in a way. Metaphysics is about a relationship with the other, with otherness, whereas ontology is more about a relationship with the same. It's a bit of an oversimplification, but you could think of it that way. Ontology is a questioning into what is uniformly, as it were, the same. The totality of what is. And metaphysics is a questioning what is beyond the same, namely the other. So he starts like this. He says, it's not by chance that the theoretical relation has been the preferred schema of the metaphysical relation. What does it mean, the theoretical relation? Theory, theoretical thinking. What are the options other than theory? Well, the typical alternative is practice. We talk about theory and practice. So practical questions are not, they have theoretical elements to them, but they're not completely theoretical. Theoretical refers to science, primarily, but to more generally to philosophical questions surrounding scientific questions. So he says it's not by chance that theory has preferred the metaphysical relation. What does that mean exactly? Why is theory metaphysical? Knowledge or theory, now he's saying these are basically the same, knowledge or theory, designates first a relation with being such that the knowing being lets the known being manifest itself while respecting its alterity and without marking it in any way whatever by its cognitive relation. In other words, in theory, when I know something, I am the knowing being, and I know something, which is the known being. And when I know something, I respect its alterity. I respect its otherness. This other thing, this pen is other than me, and I'm knowing the pen. I understand the pen. I have a theoretical appreciation of the pen. And in having a theoretical appreciation of the pen, I respect its otherness, its alterity. And that, he says, is metaphysical. That's a metaphysical relationship. In other words, it's the metaphysics here being a term for the otherness of it. Okay. In this sense, metaphysical desire would be the essence of theory. So theory is metaphysical desire. It's getting to know something other than myself. But theory also designates comprehension. The logos of being. That is a way of approaching the known being such that its alterity with regard to the knowing being vanishes. The process of cognition at this stage is identified with the freedom of the knowing being encountering nothing, which, well, you know what, let's stay away from that. It's getting too complex already. What is he saying? He's saying the theoretical approach to reality is, on the one hand, respectful of the otherness of the object of theory. Whatever I'm thinking, I'm respectful that something I'm thinking about is not me. It's other than me. At the same time, he says, theory also comprehends. And the word comprehends, like the word concept in English, which is really Latin, comes from the word to grasp. We even say in English, I'm sure it's the same in Hungarian, I'm sure you probably say, yes, I grasp what you're saying, right? Like in many languages. In German, it's also very clear. Greifen is to grasp, and Begriff is concept. So theoretical thinking, on the one hand, respects the otherness of the object. On the other hand, it grasps it and therefore assimilates it. I assimilate the object that I'm thinking about into my mind, into myself, and therefore I eliminate its otherness. I absorb it into my own mind. So theory has this twofold gesture. On the one hand, recognizing on otherness, on the other hand, collapsing it into myself, into my mind. Okay, now let's look at the paragraph at the very top of page 43. Okay, let's see if we can read this together again. Sam, let me put you on the hotspot.
Starting from just the top of the page?
Yeah, let's do one sentence at a time. See if we can. Sometimes it's, one sentence at a time is problematic because sometimes it really doesn't say enough until you read other sentences. So, but let's try. I want to do things as slowly as we possibly can. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
interesting place to start in that regard because it starts with a but.
But yes, yeah, you're right. Maybe we should start before, but okay, let's try because I think we can start with the but. You're right. Let's read the line beforehand because it's weird to start with the but.
I'll start with the sentence. Here theory enters upon a course that renounces metaphysical desire, renounces the marvel of exteriority from which that desire lives.
Okay, so that evidently picks up on what I was just saying. It picks up on that aspect of theory where there's a collapsing into the self rather than a respect for the other. Right? It renounces metaphysical desire. It's giving up metaphysics. Okay, so now we start even though theory does collapse the other into the self, nevertheless, but
theory understood as a respect for exteriority delineates another structure essential for metaphysics.
Okay, so now we're going in the other direction. It's a pendulum here. We're going back and forth, right? So now he's telling us we're going to talk about theory insofar as it respects otherness, okay?
In its comprehension of being or ontology, it is concerned with critique. It discovers the dogmatism and naive arbitrary. I don't know if that's a word. I don't know if it's supposed to be. It's a typo.
No, it's one of these weirdo philosophical terms, right?
Arbitrariness?
No, oh, I'm sorry. I think it is a typo. Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. It is a typo. It should be arbitrariness. Yeah, arbitrariness.
Okay, that's why I wasn't sure.
Yeah. My eyes didn't even catch it. You're right. It's a typo.
Naive arbitrariness of its spontaneity and calls into question the freedom of the exercise of ontology. It then seeks to exercise this freedom in such a way as to turn back at every moment to the origin of the arbitrary dogmatism of this free exercise.
Yeah, wow. Maybe I'm just wondering if we should jump over this one, just because I don't want to get into too heavily into Heidegger here, but let me just I'll just try to quickly explain what he's saying here, right? That there's the naivete to ontology. Ontology, the study of being, is naive in a certain sense in its approach to being. And theory, which he's saying here is superior to ontology. How is it superior? Because it's critical. It doesn't accept the naive dogmatism of ontology. It approaches it in a critical sense. Okay, let's jump now to the sentence. I hope it'll become more clear what he's getting at. Let's jump to that sentence. It's critical intention. This being the critical intention again of theory, of theoretical thinking. See the sentence? Just jumping one sentence there. Sam, I'm asking. Huh?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Are you asking me to read?
Yeah.
I got sucked in trying to untangle the long sentence.
I know.
Starting from this would?
It's critical. Okay, this would lead. Okay.
It's critical. I can do. It's
Yeah.
critical. Its critical intention then leads it beyond theory and ontology. Critique does not reduce the other to the same as does ontology, but calls into question the exercise of the same.
Okay, so critique calls into question the exercise of the same. The exercise of the same again is this aspect of theory where we're collapsing the other into myself. Now, and he wants to now, and he's underscoring the criticism, critique, and the word critique means judgment, right? But it means both, in normal parlance, it means really prosecution, accusation. I'm being critical of someone. But critique really means judgment. It's more than prosecution. It's what the judge does. So, so keep going, Sam. We're calling into question.
looked away for a moment.
Yeah.
And I thought,
That's okay.
calling into question.
Of the same. Yeah.
A calling into question of the same, which cannot occur within the egoist spontaneity of the same, is brought about by the other. We name this calling into question of my spontaneity by the presence of the other ethics.
Okay, let's pause there. So we have critique, which is a calling into question of the same. And now he's calling critique ethics. Why is it ethics?
So if all conversation is self-justification, it would seem to me that a rejection of that self-justification and thereby casting judgment on you, that judgment is what ethics, because we are saying that your justification is incorrect, and there must be some basis for us to saying that justification is incorrect, and that basis is morality.
Okay, that's really good. That's good, especially because you tied in nicely the idea of critique, which means judgment, with what he said earlier, right, about judgment, but I'm being judged by the other. So here it works very well, right, with this word critique, which means judgment, right? Exactly. So I'm being judged. I'm under critique by the other. And that's what ethics is. Ethics is me standing me standing under the critical eye of the other. And what does the word spontaneity mean in this context then, right? We name this calling into question of my spontaneity by the presence of the other ethics. Why? What does he mean by spontaneity here? Or why is the word spontaneity useful in describing the situation here?
In a way, maybe I'm totally off base here, but I can't help but think of it in terms of when John Locke describes the state of nature and the social contract. He basically says that the pure state of nature is everyone exists in absolute freedom, and we can do whatever we want and under any circumstances whatsoever. And then he builds up to why this is bad, which is that if you can do whatever you want, some people want to hurt each other and take each other's things. So the imposition of something, shrinking spontaneity really means limiting your ability to do whatever you want. And that's good, because you might want to do bad things.
That's good. I think that's a great parallel. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, the self, the natural, as you put it, or as John Locke puts it, right? Naturally, we are spontaneous. And in modern times, in the 20th century, there began to be an unprecedented celebration of spontaneity. All kinds of movements, whether it's psychology, whether it's the hippies, whatever, people cherish spontaneity. Let it out, be yourself, be more natural, as John Locke would say. So here he's saying ethics, as you very nicely said, as John Locke says, is curtailing, is limiting that spontaneity. Spontaneity, unbridled spontaneity leads to chaos, as John Locke would say, and for Levinas it leads to it's just unethical. If a person could just do whatever they want, that's the opposite of ethics, right? And how is that spontaneity contained? By the presence of the other. The other is what puts a limit on my spontaneity. Okay, Alexandra, you want to pick up from there? Let's see how we can do.
The strangeness of the other, his irreducibility to the I, to my thoughts and my possessions, is precisely accomplished as a calling into question of my spontaneity. as ethics.
Okay, what does that add? That sentence is not too bad. What do you think? I really like the word strangeness. What do you think of this word strangeness? The strangeness of the other. I mean, the second part of the sentence is just repeating the previous sentence, right? It's all about this spontaneity, calling into question of spontaneity. That's what ethics is, right? So, what does the first part of the sentence add to it?
To me, it seems to show some hopelessness, like it's almost irreconcilable, the difference between the I and the other.
Yes, okay, good.
And it's before it seemed that you can grasp it, you can cooperate, and now here it's even the beginning, the strangeness, that's okay, but it continues with irreducibility.
Yeah, his irreducibility to the I, right? I can't reduce somebody else to my I. Yeah, you have thoughts on this? What do you think of this? The strangeness of the other, the irreducibility to the I. And as I've mentioned before, the word strange is a strong biblical term. Maybe it's worth mentioning this at this point. There is in the word ger in Hebrew, which in modern usage of the word usually means convert, but ger in the Torah most simply and most originally means a stranger who comes from another land into my land. Ausländer, as they say in German, right? Somebody comes to my land from another land, or from another tribe into my tribe, or from another place to my place. If you look at the culture of the ancient Middle East, even today, until today, in good Arab culture, assuming that Arab represents the Middle Eastern culture in general, there is a very strong ethic of hospitality towards strangers. It always has been, ever since ancient times, before the Torah even. The idea of giving hospitality to strangers is a universal theme among Middle Eastern cultures. And you can kind of understand why. This is a landscape, a desert landscape where people are wandering, nomads are wandering through the desert for who knows how long. They don't have food, they're thirsty. So when somebody comes to your land, we could say a lot about the psychology of it. What's the benefit for me being hospitable towards other people? But in any case, there is this ethic of hospitality. What's interesting is that, generally speaking, this ethic has a time limit. The time limit is 3 days. If a stranger comes to me to my tent, I should take care of him for 3 days. After that, I have no more responsibility. You came to me hungry, thirsty, tired. I've given you 3 days to recuperate. I fed you. I give you to drink. You can sleep. Now you have to leave. I am not a hotel, right? And that's the standard kind of ethic. There's definitely a limit. And by the way, the limit is imposed by my God. In other words, it's my God. When a person would come to my home from abroad, why am I obliged to take care of this person? Because this person is actually seeking refuge from my God, a local God, not God. We're talking about very, very local gods. God, it could be just my family God. That was a very common thing to have. If you know the story with Yaakov Avinu, when his daughter Rachel, when she steals the terafim, as they're called in Latin, lares et penates, the household gods. Everybody had the gods of their household. And in that story, Rachel steals Lavan. She steals her father's household gods and creates a big problem for him, whatever. So when people come to my tent, I'm obliged to take care of them because my God, because this person has appealed to my God, and therefore, by the laws of my God, I'm obliged to take care of them, but only for 3 days. What happened is that when the concept of God became expanded to infinite proportions in the Torah, this, by the way, this is a theory that I'm giving you, which is from a book that we'll have a chance to look at in our next class, a book called The Religion of the Semites by Robertson Smith. When the concept of God expands from a household God to infinite proportions, so correspondingly, the concept of ger, of a stranger, also becomes unlimited. It's no longer 3 days. In the Torah, there's no time limit to my taking care of the stranger. The stranger is somebody under given conditions. There are definite limitations on what a stranger can expect from me. But if a stranger is respectful toward my hospitality, he can't take advantage of me. After all, the stranger can't come and abuse me, and I'm not infinitely indebted in that sense. But given the limitations of my hospitality towards the stranger, there really is no limit to how long the stranger can really sojourn with me. In fact, the word ger in Hebrew can be translated in English as sojourner. I forgot I actually knew the Hungarian term for this because of something I wrote for Ed Shea about sojourning. Sojourn means to stay for a while. Séjour, actually in French, we had that word in here, from the word jour, which means, that's in the Udvar, which the word jour, which in French means day, is even contained in the word sojourn. I stay for a day or a couple of days. So a ger in biblical law, in the Torah, is somebody that can stay with me indefinitely, can stay in my land indefinitely, so long as he or she is respectful towards the basic rules of my land. Okay, why am I bringing all of that? That's the biblical background to Levinas's use of the word stranger and strange. So Alexander just read, the strangeness of the other. The other is always a type of ger, is always a stranger, is always somebody seeking hospitality from me. This person is irreducible to my eye. Why is that important? And how is that really... See, this is really, in a way, telling us what the great and difficult task of ethics is. Why is ethical behavior so difficult?
On a superficial level, the different frameworks.
Okay, good. If you think about how much time people spend being not just negative, but critical of other human beings, sometimes, of course, it's warranted. Criticism, as he's saying here, right? The conversation is criticism, it's apology, and so on. But at the same time, when we're confronted by any human being, just even each other, and culturally speaking, there's a lot that unites us. Obviously, there are differences. In some ways, Sam and I have more in common because we speak English, you speak Hungarian, so there's a Hungarian mentality. So when English speakers like Sam and I will get together and say, "Wow, Hungarians are really weird. It's really strange," is that way. They're very strange. And it's literally true. Of course they're strange, right? Their mentality, their framework, as you say, is different from ours. And you will likewise inevitably do the same. You'll say, well, Americans, Canadians, they're very strange. Of course, because our framework is different. But even within a given cultural framework, no doubt you will often be critical of fellow Hungarians, as I will be critical of fellow Canadians or Israelis or Jews or Americans, when you say, wow, that person's very strange, really odd. We use all that kind of language, strange, other, very weird. All these terms point to the fact that their emotional, their mental makeup is not like mine. And my desire, my natural spontaneous desire, is to connect with people who are like me. What is a friend? When you speak to somebody and within a couple of minutes you realize, wow, this person, I could be friends with this person. Why? Because everything that's coming out of their mouths is something I could have said. Maybe even it's not something I ever said, but I could have said that. I think, wow, I really like how you said that, because it agrees with the way I think. Well, when there's agreement, when there's sameness between myself and the other, it's very easy. It's very easy to become friends because we are the same. And what is friendship? Friendship is very much predicated upon sameness. Which means, in a way, that friendship is not really what Levinas would call an ethical relationship. Ethics is precisely when we can't be friends with somebody. When I need to be ethical with somebody, precisely because I don't understand this person. He's saying things that really, like, why? He's from I love the expression, oh, he's from another planet. I don't know if you say that in Hungarian, but in English, this guy's from another planet. He's so out there. He's not just from another country. He's from a completely other planet. Years ago, there was a book with a fun title, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, which encapsulates this problem across the genders, that there are differences not just between cultures. The frames of reference are quite different even between men and women, presumably for biological reasons. That might also be, it's hard to say to what extent it's nature, to what extent it's nurture. But let's say, for argument's sake, that women and men are biologically programmed to be from different planets. Women are from the planet Venus, and men are from the planet Mars. Which means that every time a man talks to a woman, basically we have to assume that there's going to be an issue. And of course it becomes a very big issue in marriage. In marriage, I'm married to somebody from another planet. She is saying things that just Martians just don't say. And she's thinking exactly the same thing about me. She's saying Venusians just don't speak that way. I don't understand what he's saying. He's so weird. He's so strange. Well, yeah, that's the ethical problem in marriage. It's the ethical challenge in marriage. But that's just one type of ethical challenge. Any type of relationship between two human beings where we are struck by the unfamiliarity, the irreducibility of the other. I would love to make the other like me. It would make my life so much easier if the whole world was my friend. If everybody I spoke to spoke my language in every sense of the word, not just English, but spoke my language, my emotional language, if everybody was like me, then my life would just be so much easier. This, by the way, I don't want to get too far on a tangent on this, but this is one aspect, I believe, of the Jewish criticism of homosexuality. We have to be careful. I have to be careful when I say that. I'm not talking about beating up gay people or anything like that. Chas v'shalom. What I mean is that as a philosophical, purely philosophical. Again, I want to stress this. Judaism. I don't want to suggest that we're, as Jews, we have a right to go beat up or even criticize gay people openly. I think it's we have to respect everybody's freedom. But insofar as gay culture promotes a philosophical outlook on life, Judaism is critical of that. Why? On this point. Because philosophically speaking, by the way, I don't know if gay culture, I'm really thinking of gay culture of Plato. And I don't know to what extent modern gay culture it confirms Platonic homosexuality. I don't think it does completely. To some extent it does. But in Plato, you see very clearly Plato was gay. Plato and his whole generation of Greeks, Socrates, they were all gay. And they weren't just gay because it was fun or because they were feminine. They actually weren't very feminine at all. They're very masculine gay men. They were gay. They themselves said, we are gay because it's impossible to speak to women on an eye-to-eye level. Women are so strange. They are so from Venus. We just don't know how to get along with women. We don't know how to talk to them. And therefore we will create a society of men, of Martians, men from Mars, where we can love each other as same, on the level of sameness, because women are too other. So in a sense, Greek homosexuality was founded on misogyny.